Welcome to the third video of the Blender 2.8 Beginners tutorial, where you will learn how to create juicy apples in Blender 2.8 and learn the most important fundamentals while doing that. In this video we will take a look on how to work with objects, how to transform the objects, and how the edit mode works to model an apple out of a sphere. And very important, in the last section of this video I will show you how to solve a certain problem which is number one on my top list for problem causing things in Blender. So make sure to watch till the end. As always, you find all the timestamps and important links in the video description, and if you want to follow along you can sign up to our resource section free of charge to download all the blend files, textures and videos of this project and our handy Blender 2.8 shortcut PDF. Hi everyone, Zach here for cgboost.com, and let's get started. In our default scene we have this cube here which is already selected. Let's open up the sidebar here, and as you can see the selected object has a dimension of 2 by 2 by 2 meters. So this cube is actually really big. But we want to create a scene with relative small objects like the apple, for example. And to make this easier for us, let's change the units here. So let's go over to the properties editor and go to the scene settings. Here you find units. And first of all, let's change the display length to centimeters. Now you can see we won't see meters anymore. Here we see 200 centimeters instead. And let's change the unit scale. Let's click in here to 0.1. Let's hit enter. And now you can see the scene has scaled and the objects too. This cube is now just 20 by 20 by 20 centimeters in size. And this will help us to work with very small objects much better. Let's press N to hide the sidebar. And you can see in our default 3D scene we have the camera, the cube and the lamp. But for now we don't need all of that. So let's left click, select and draw a box around the cube and the lamp. Press X and then click delete. Now these two objects are deleted, and up here in the outliner where we can see all the objects of our scene, let's click on the little eye behind the camera to hide the camera because it's just in the way. The camera we need later on to output an image. And for the lighting part later on we will add new lamps. Let's also get rid of the timeline down here since we don't want to animate anything. We can simply remove it by right clicking on the edge here, click on join area and click on the arrow down here. Now this is gone and we have big space for modeling. Whenever you want to start creating a new object, you think about what basic shape you can use which looks similar to the object you want to create, and this makes the whole modeling process much easier. In case of an apple, you guessed it, it's certainly a sphere. To add a new object, you simply click on add up here, then go to mesh, and here we have a bunch of basic shapes. As you can see, we also have a lot of other categories, but in most cases, if you modeled something, you just need the mesh objects, so we can ignore the other stuff for now. And in this case, let's use the UV sphere. So this is relatively big, so let's zoom back a bit. And you can see the objects will be placed on the position of the 3D cursor, this little thing here. You can easily change the position of the 3D cursor by using the cursor tool and then left clicking somewhere in 3D space. And now if I, for example, add another object, for example, a cube here, you can see it will be added over here. The rotation of the 3D cursor doesn't matter in this case. Let's also click over here and let's also add a simple cylinder. So now let's change back to the box select tool over here. And as you can see, we are in object mode. That means we can, with left click, select the objects. With shift left click, I can select multiple. And if I simply want to deselect everything, left click somewhere into the empty space. Then we have certain tools to transform the objects. That means place them somewhere in 3D space. For that we have the move tool. That means I can select an object. Then we have this gizmo here. And if I click on these arrows, I can move these around on the X, Y, and Z axis. Same works for the other objects. And it also works if I have multiple objects selected. Then we also have the rotate tool, which allows us to rotate along a certain axis. Or if I just left click somewhere in empty space, I can also freely rotate this. And the last option we have here is the scale tool, which allows us to change the size of an object. If I left click in empty space and hold and move my mouse around, you can see I can change the whole volume of an object, or I simply click on one of those axes to change the scale along a certain axis. If I go back to the move tool and left click on this cube here, you can see that this gizmo down here is not rotated along the cube's rotation. In order to see the gizmo also rotated along the cube, you can change the transform orientation up here from global to local. And now, as you can see, I can simply move this along the local axis of the cube. Same works over here, and if I, for example, rotate this, now also the gizmo for the rotate tool is changing accordingly. Let's press N again to open the sidebar, and here you can also have a look at the location, rotation, and the scale of the object. So, and for example, if you quickly want to reset this, you can left click and hold, select all the 3 values and enter 0. Same for rotation, and the default scale value is 1. And now you can see the object is back as it should be. So now let's press N to hide the sidebar, get back to the box select tool, press A to select everything. Then let's press X and delete all the objects here. Now you can see the cursor is somewhere here. I want to have it back in the center. So I right click, click on snap, and then click on cursor to world origin. Now the cursor is back in the center. And now let's start to model the apple. Again, let's go to add, mesh, add a UV sphere. Now let's rename this object. Double click up here in the outliner on the object. Call it apple, so we don't lose track of all the objects here. And as soon as you add an object or do anything here in the 3D viewport, this little thing appears down here. So if I click on that, a menu pops up, and this menu relates to the last action we have done in the 3D viewport. So, and here you can see add UV sphere. That means we added the UV sphere, and now we can change things on the sphere. For example, the segments and rings, which is basically the resolution. So let's reduce this a bit. Let's change this to 16 and the rings to 12. If you think this looks a little bit too angular for an apple, don't worry, we will add a higher resolution later on. But to make the modeling process easier for us, the lower the resolution is, the less trouble we have. And now let's change also the radius of the sphere to 8 centimeters, because the apple I have here as reference has a radius of 8 centimeters. Alright, stop. Certainly the radius of an ordinary apple is not 8 centimeters. This would be way too big. But while recording this video, I just had in my head that the radius is a diameter. And certainly it's not, so please reduce the radius down to 4 centimeters to have a diameter of 8 centimeters. In this video, I will go on working with 8 centimeters, but in the end, I will readjust the size of the finished apple. Okay, now let's go on. So, the problem with this little window down here is as soon as you do anything else, it will disappear. So if I now, for example, move the sphere around, you can see we now have the move information down here. Let's press Ctrl Z to undo this. And that means as soon as you add an object, you have to change the properties down here to make this work, because as soon as you do anything else, you won't get this menu back. So the sphere is relatively small, so let's zoom in a bit. And as you can see, sometimes it happens that we got stuck in the viewport. And if this happens, basically you have to recenter the viewport to the selected object. And you can simply do it by selecting the object and press period on the numpad. Then this will be centered. And you can also find this option up here under View, Frame Selected if you don't have a numpad. And now I can easily zoom in and out again. Now we want to shape this object to make it look like an apple. So first of all, the object is selected. Then let's go over here to Edit Mode. So now you can see the appearance of this object has changed. Everything is selected here right now. So let's left click somewhere in empty space to deselect everything. And now we have access to the mesh of the sphere here. So I can select vertices with left click, or multiple vertices with shift and left click. With the box select tool selected, I can also draw a box here. And we also can change the selection mode to edges. So we can select edges over here. Again, with shift, we can select multiple. And we can also use the face selection, so I can select full faces here, or with Shift multiple faces. You can also change the selection modes up here by pressing 1, 2 and 3 on the keyboard, the numbers above the letters. Similar as in object mode, as soon as you select something, you can use the transform tools again. That means we can use the move tool to move these elements around. I can use the rotate tool, and I can even use the scale tool here. And in this way, I can start shaping this object. But for now, let's undo this with Ctrl Z. Besides the transform tools up here, we also have some other tools to manipulate the mesh. We will take a look at some of these tools while we are modeling the objects for the scene here. So before you start modeling something, I always recommend to have reference images or objects on hand, because it can be really hard to just model something out of your imagination. So I have an apple here on my table, so I know exactly how this looks like. And in order to start the modeling process, let's enable the vertex selection up here and left click on the upper vertex. Now let's use the move tool. And now I could just move this one vertex around, but I want to create this nice roundish shape of the apple up here. So I enable this little button, which stands for proportional editing. That means I can left click and hold, move this around, and then you can see this circle appears. And this circle defines a radius with a fall off. That means everything which is connected to this one selected vertex will now move along with the vertex. And while I hold down left click, I can scroll the mouse wheel to define the radius. And if I make it a bit smaller and move the one vertex to the inside, you can see that the shape of the apple will be created. And we can do the same thing down here. Let's select one vertex, move it up a bit, make this a bit smaller, something like this. And again, don't worry that this looks so angular at this moment. In the end, this will look very nice and smooth. So now let's adjust the shape of the apple a bit further. First of all, let's hold down Alt and left click on this horizontal edge here. Now you can see with holding down Alt and left click, we select loop. So we have a whole circle selected here. If you Alt left click on a vertical line, the loop will go vertically, as you can see. So let's select this one here and use the scale tool and scale this down a bit. Scroll your mouse wheel to adjust the size of the radius of the proportional editing. Something like this looks good to me. And now let's use the move tool. Click on the Z axis up here to show the apple from above. And in real life, an apple has never a perfect round shape. So let's simply select a vertex over here, for example, and left click and hold somewhere here in empty space. And then we can move it around, as you can see. And if you like, you can also change the radius a bit. And now I just want to deform this a bit because it's an organic object and this shouldn't look like a perfect circle from above. So we can also change the view a bit and pick a few vertices here and there and change the shape a bit. So I think that looks good to me. Now, very important, disable proportional editing, because if you keep it enabled accidentally and later on edit the mesh, you might wonder why everything moves along with your selection. Now let's switch back to object mode. And now I mentioned that we will make the apple look very nice and smooth. So in order to do that, we have to do two things. First of all, we add a so-called subdivision surface modifier. So the apple is selected. Let's go to the blue wrench symbol down here. And then let's click on Add Modifier. And down here under the Generate category, we find Subdivision Surface. As you can see, as soon as I add this thing, the mesh will be subdivided and the whole thing looks way smoother. If I increase the viewport subdivisions to 2, for example, this looks even better. And the modifiers are basically kind of mesh filters which will be added to the mesh. They are non-destructive. That means we can always disable them or remove them completely. But in edit mode, the original mesh, as you can see from the black mesh here, stays intact. So we don't subdivide the original mesh. Just imagine how crazy this would be if we have so many vertices here which we need to edit. So let's get back to object mode, but we still can see all the tiny faces here, so it doesn't really look that smooth. What we have to do, the apple is still selected, right click and click on Shade Smooth. Now all the transitions between all these little faces here will be basically blurred. And now this looks like one big smooth surface. Now one thing is missing, the little stem up here. So first of all, let's use the cursor tool. Let's place it somewhere here in the center. And as you can see, as soon as I click on an object, the cursor will stay on the surface, which is pretty cool. But as mentioned, the rotation of the cursor doesn't matter in this case. Let's click on Add Mesh. And by the way, if you don't always want to go up here to the Add menu, you also can press Shift A to open the Add menu directly on your mouse position. And in this case, let's add a cylinder because the stamp looks kind of like a cylinder. So let's zoom back a bit. You can see it's very big. So first of all, down here, let's change the radius to 1.5 millimeters, the depth to 1 centimeter, and the resolution to 8, I would say. Let's zoom in here. Now you can see this little stamp. So now this looks very tiny, but don't worry, we will make it bigger. First of all, let's rename this to stamp and the sphere to apple. Now let's select the stamp. For this, we need to select the select box tool. Select the stamp and now switch over to edit mode. In order to switch between object and edit mode without going to the menu up here, you simply have to press the tab button. And as you can see, as soon as you select an object and press tab, you will enter edit mode. And if you press tab again, you will get back to object mode. So now I'm in edit mode of the stem here. First of all, let's zoom in a bit and move it up just a bit. It still should stick a bit inside of the apple. And one thing, if I zoom inside of the apple here, let's use the face selection, left click somewhere else to deselect everything and just select the lower face here. This is inside of the apple, so we don't need this. So I can press X and then this delete menu appears. And in this case, I want to delete the face. So I click on that and then you can see this mesh is now open. If you want to close a hole, let's select the vertex selection. With Alt left click, let's select the whole loop here and then you have to press F to fill this open hole. So basically you have to select everything around the hole and then press F. So, but in this case we want to have it open. And now let's select the upper face here and press on this green dot here to see it from front view. But as you can see, this stamp is now behind the apple. And in order to make this visible, we can click on the X-ray button up here. And now we can see through the apple and we can also see through the mesh. So for example, if I disable this once again, use the vertex selection, I can't select the vertices which are down here on the other side. But if I have X-ray enabled, I can select this, which is very useful. So now let's click on the green dot here again. Let's go to the face selection, select the upper face here, and now let's use the extrude tool. If I left click over here with the double arrow and move it to the side, we can also see the names of the tools. So here we have the extrude region tool. If I click on that, I can extrude the selected faces here. Works also for vertices and edges. Left click on this plus and hold and move it up to create this extrusion. Then let's use the scale tool here and scale this up. In order to not always change between move, rotate, scale, we can also use shortcuts. For example, if I want to scale something, I have to select this. I don't even need the scale tool to be selected. And then I can simply press S, pretty easy to remember, and make it bigger. If you want to move things without using the tool here, you have to press G. G you can remember like grab, because now it sticks on my mouse. I can move it somewhere and simply left click to place it. And we can use the rotate tool by pressing R. Now I can rotate this, as you can see. These shortcuts also works in object mode, by the way. Now the stem is a bit straight, so let's add a cut over here, and this we can do with the loop cut tool. So let's select this, and as you can see, as soon as I move my mouse above the mesh here, this yellow preview line appears. And for example, if I zoom in a bit, you can see if I move my mouse above vertical lying edges, the cut will be placed horizontally. If I place my mouse above a horizontal line, it will be cutted vertically. So we want to add a cut over here. And if we like, we can even add more cuts. So let's increase the cuts to 2. Let's take a look from the side here once again. And now let's press G for moving this to the side. Let's zoom back a bit, tap to object mode and disable X-ray. This is how this looks now. What we can do over here is again right click, shade smooth, and we can also add the subdivision surface modifier to make this a bit more smooth. And let's change the viewport subdivisions to 2. The only thing we can see up here is that this looks a bit too smooth because the stem of an apple is relatively flat up here. So what we can do, let's tap back to edit mode and add another loop cut over here. Then let's get back to select box. And as you remember, I can press G to move this around. And there's a little trick. If I press G again, so basically pressing G twice, I can slide the edges. And as soon as I slide 2 edges closer together, the subdivisions of the subdivision surface modifier will create a sharper edge. So I don't have this long rounded shape anymore. Now this is relatively flat. And if you feel that the stem is too thick or too thin, you can press A to select everything and use the shrink fatten tool. So if I click on that, now simply with everything here selected, left click and hold and then move my mouse to the side. I can make it thinner or thicker. So you can adjust this as you like. Now let's tap back to object mode. And now we have one little problem left. If I select the apple and press G to move it around, you can see I can move the apple, but the stem just stays where it is. Certainly I could shift select both and move them around, but just imagine you have multiple apples in your scene and you don't always want to select the apple and all the stems. We can join 2 objects. In this case, this works because the stem uses a subsurf modifier with 2 subdivisions and the apple as well. If you have different modifiers on both objects, this can cause problems if you join both objects. But in this case, that's fine. In order to join 2 objects, simply select one object you want to join to another object. Then with Shift, select the other object, in this case, the apple, and then right click and click on Join. You can also press Ctrl J if you like. Now both objects are joined into one object. That means these objects were not grouped. You can see there's just one object left. The stem was now really added to the mesh of the apple here. It's still separated, as you can see in edit mode, but they both belong into one mesh in one object. I think the apple needs just one little adjustment up here. I think this whole area is too flat. So what we do, let's disable the subsurf modifier for a second so we can see the mesh better. Let's zoom into the mesh. Let's select the one vertex up here. And using the move tool, let's move it down a bit. And with Alt left click, let's select this loop, press S, scale it down a bit. And maybe here again, scale this. Now, as you can see, the stem is hovering in the air. Let's simply deselect everything and move your mouse cursor above the stem and then simply press L. Then as you can see, all the connected vertices will be selected. And now, if I like, I can simply press S to scale it a bit and even move it down if I like. Maybe let's rotate this a bit to make this not look too straight. So now let's tap back to object mode and re-enable the subsurf modifier. And this is the finished apple. Now let's go to File, Save As. Over here in the volumes, you can navigate to your hard drives. Over here, you can navigate the folders, then enter a name. In my case, I already saved the file, so I simply click on the plus symbol to add a new version and then save as Blender file. Voila! You just learned modeling in Blender and how to create an apple. So as I mentioned in the video, I was using a wrong scaling for the apple here. So let's press N to open up the sidebar. And here under dimensions, you can see the actual size of the object. So if I take a look from the side, each axis has its own size value. And for example, in the Z direction, this takes the furthest point of the mesh over here and the furthest point of the mesh down here and calculates the distance. And this is the values we have over here. And basically, as you can see over here, for the X value, we have 14 centimeters. And if you imagine an apple with 14 centimeters diameter, this is really huge. But the good thing is in 3D, we can simply scale objects. So in general, this is absolutely no problem. So let's press S and simply scale this down until the X value reaches roughly 8 centimeters. So it doesn't have to be perfect because this is just an organic object. So after all, it was good that this happens because then I can show you one very specific problem, which is one of the most top things which causes problems later on. And this is a non-uniform scale value, or in other words, a scale value which is not 1, 1, 1 for X, Y, and Z. You can see we have the dimensions over here, which basically shows us the actual size of the object, but we also have this scale value here, which is basically something like a factor. So if I press S and simply enter 2 on the keyboard and confirm this by pressing enter, you can see the scale value doubled, and certainly also the dimensions has changed accordingly. Let's redo this. And what is this scale value? Basically, when you add a new object, so for example, let's add a cube here, Blender remembers the default size, and the default size of an object is always 1, 1, 1. So as soon as I scale the object, you can see that the scale value changes. So if I change it down here, you can see we have a different value, but as soon as I set this back to 1, 1, 1, we have the original size of the object back. So the problem here is that as soon as I scale the object in object mode, the changed scale value does not only affect the size of the object, but also many things which are attached to the object. I give you a quick example here. The cube is selected. Let's go to the modifiers and simply add a bevel modifier. This bevel modifier adds this beveled edge over here. And let's change the width to 10 centimeters. Now, since the scale value is 1, 1, 1, this edge is perfectly 10 centimeters in size. However, if I now press S to scale the object, you can see the edge gets smaller, but the width value is still 10 centimeters. So the width of this 10 centimeters basically were also scaled down by the factor of 0.212. And not only modifiers will be affected by the scale value, also materials and textures can be affected, and also the behavior of tools in edit mode. So in general, this can cause problems. So what we can do, we can tell Blender that this new size of the object should be the new default scale value of the object. In order to do that, the object needs to be selected. Then we click on Object, Apply, or simply press Ctrl A, and then we apply this scale. So I click on that. Now you can see the size of the object has not changed, but the scale value is back at 1, 1, and 1. And now you can also see that the size of the beveled edge has changed again to its original 10 centimeters. Because now this 10 centimeters are scaled by 1. And why do I talk about this topic so much? Because it's so important. It will cause a lot of problems while modeling. So this is something you have to keep in mind. Basically, whenever you scale an object in object mode, after that, press Ctrl A and simply apply the scale. Or if you just noticed that tools in edit mode behave strangely, or that your modifiers behave different than you expected, check the scale value of your object, and if this is not 1, 1, 1, press Ctrl A and apply the scale. So now we have an apple with a realistic size. Let's press N and let's press Ctrl S to save this blend file again. Yeah guys, now you have a rough idea on how to work with objects in object mode and how to change the shape of an object in edit mode. We will practice more modeling in the next videos, and if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, subscribe and ring the bell. And let me know in the comment section below what is the #1 thing you would like to model when you learn Blender properly. By the way, if you enjoy our content and want to dive even deeper into Blender 2.8, check our Blender 2.8 Launchpad course. There, besides other things, you will learn how to create this animated car scene here from scratch. So there you'll learn how to model this car step by step. Follow the link in the video description to learn more. And by the way, all the people that enroll in our courses support this YouTube channel here so that we can create more free videos. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. Now check the next video where we will model the knife for the scene. There we will use some reference images directly in Blender to model the knife. I will see you there. Goodbye.